Welcome back everyone, Oz here, and today we're doing some more r/TraumatizeThemBack. Buckle in because this one is going to be a little rough, but it should be worth it in the end. I see, 2800. You are now using my back scratcher to serve your pasta. I have one of those plastic spaghetti spoons, you know, with those little claws with the holes in the middle, and it recently got broken and I've been using it as a back scratcher, so it's usually somewhere in the region of the couch. Yes, I clean it daily. So, some annoying friends of my boyfriend came over for dinner. He thinks they're okay, but he's not subtle, so doesn't pick up on social cues. The girl is more annoying than the guy, but they're both condescending as fuck. So she walks in, sees my back scratcher, and squeals. I really don't have another word for it. Oh, someone got distracted doing the dishes. Better put this in its proper place. Dear reader, I was planning to give them spaghetti and meatballs. What happened next was satisfying as fuck. We sit down, and because I haven't replaced my back scratcher yet, I was serving spaghetti with a large fork. The girl sighs dramatically, gets up and takes my back scratcher from the drawer and starts serving everybody spaghetti. I refuse and use a fork, also for my boyfriend. She keeps sighing and finally asks, "Why are you so adamant on doing things your way, even to the point that you can't accept me serving spaghetti the normal way?" Keeping dumb, I ask to explain what the normal way to serve pasta is. She sighs, rolls her eyes, and waves my back scratcher in front of my eyes and says, "Like you don't know how to use this." I said, "I use that as a back scratcher because it's broken. That's why it was besides the couch." She starts laughing it off until my husband says, yeah, that is what she uses it for. Be passive-aggressive in my house at your own risk. Honestly, bro, that fucking sucks. They probably thought they were being kinda helpful, despite their condescending nature. It was like, oh, here's how you actually serve spaghetti. Here's my yeast-covered back scratcher that is probably covered in skin cells. Don't make assumptions in someone else's house. That's usually the best way to live through life. I know they said they clean it daily, but it was still by the couch, probably either touching the leather or the floor, God knows where. That was used with food. Ugh. That actually reminds me of a mildly traumatic story that I remember from when I was 12. I was visiting my grandma's house and they had a back scratcher. It was like a wooden one that you would actually use. So I was like using it for a bit. It's like, oh, this is pretty good. Set it down, enjoying watching some TV. Grandma walks in, sits down, watching TV too. A little bit later, she's like, "Oh, Bella, do you want your butt scratched?" And she grabs the fucking claw and just goes to town. All while doing the baby voice and talking to the dog with, "Oh, Bella, you love your butt scratcher, don't you?" Here I am just sitting there in complete horror, realizing what I had just done. And the sudden urge to take a long, scalding shower was suddenly the top priority of the night. Eclectic Eccentric 5-1. My teacher wouldn't let me use the bathroom during a test, so I peed on her carpet. The title makes me sound like some super cool rebel engaging in some sweet malicious compliance. No, in fact, I was a shy little beanpole struggling with undiagnosed ADHD and a bladder condition. In 7th grade, my English teacher had a rule that if you didn't bring back your book, you couldn't take bathroom breaks. Let's ignore that having access to the bathroom is a right and not a privilege, alright? I was always a forgetful child. I've lost pencils, stuffed animals, jackets, glasses, and much more from a very young age. At the time, I was also a kid who wet their pants in bed all the time. Neither of these issues were properly, still don't really know what the bladder thing is at 28 years old, addressed or diagnosed until I was in my 20s. Needless to say, I did not do a great job of bringing my book in. During a test, I had the strong urge to go to the bathroom. At that point in time, my urges were accompanied by a leak that made it through to my pants and did not leave me a lot of time to hold it in. I walked over to her desk, keeping my skinny little thighs pressed together to hide the wet stain. When I asked to go to the bathroom, I was given a firm no. I was a kid that followed rules religiously and was uncomfortable speaking up against authority figures, so I waddled back to my seat and tried to finish my test. There was a lot of squirming, thigh squeezing, hand pressing, and grimacing, but none of it stopped the inevitable. Not only did I massively wet my pants, but it filled the empty space of the plastic seat and dripped into a puddle that soaked into the carpet. I thank whatever deity is out there that there wasn't tile. The people around me would definitely have been able to hear it happen, and I probably would have burst out into some very ugly crying. Holding back tears, I raised a trembling hand and had to whisper that I had an accident. Her attitude did a complete 180-degree backflip. She turned fumbling her words as she worked out a plan. I would hold on to my test at my desk and wait until the bell rang. The classroom would be empty for about 30 to 45 seconds between the English class walking out and her study hall kids walking in, so she could call my 8th period teacher and explain that I wouldn't be there. She would have the kid whose chair I drenched sit in a different seat, and I would be able to write it out until school was over. I sat through a silent study hall with a book planted in front of me while I battled the tears I wanted to cry. When it finally ended, she scurried off to my locker with my combination on a sticky note and came back with my gym clothes. She then stood guard outside the narrow window alongside the door while I changed. A janitor arrived before I left, so I had 2 people to shakily apologize to with very wet eyes. My mom told me that my teacher contacted her with some very emotional apologies and many promises to let me use the bathroom whenever I needed to. She apologized to me as well and generally was much kinder. She had previously been pretty cold because of the aforementioned forgetfulness. At the time, this didn't feel like a traumatize-them-back moment. I didn't start owning the issue I dealt with until my mid-20s, and now I actively embrace them. I'm very open with my partner about when I'm having particular symptoms and have advocated for myself medically to find solutions, admittedly only partial ones. It's horribly sad to think about how much I let embarrassment and shame dictate my life. It kept me from having sleepovers, made me miss field trips, and contributed significantly to my social anxiety. Looking back at this negative experience, however, makes me feel a little bit satisfied that the person who actually should be ashamed, i.e. the person who disregarded someone else's needs, was clearly traumatized to a degree, and I certainly don't let people make me feel ashamed of my limitations anymore. Now, we've covered previous bathroom stories with dealing with teachers not letting students go and that turning out horribly for them, including my own, but I actually found a comment down here that I thought would be really interesting to include because it gives some insight, and that allows me to segue into another point here. This comment was left in by a tattooed librarian. I'm going to get downvoted, but I get so tired of seeing this and all the "I would always let kids go to the bathroom. What kind of teacher tells a kid no? Try it. Be a teacher for a few days. We could always use subs." You go in thinking you would never, and after 5 minutes, you realize you absolutely would. Because older kids vandalize, cheat, do drugs, and wander the halls. Younger kids play around and wander the halls. Then, it's like dominoes. One kid asks to go, and then you spend all of your time monitoring who is in the bathroom. You get nothing else done besides that. And you are responsible for their safety. You learn who really needs to go and who wants to screw around. And you start saying no. Seriously, come on, try it. Come do the job. We would love to have compassionate people. Crowd management is no joke. I actually feel like this goes really well with the story that we just heard, because the teacher in question, they're definitely an empathetic person. They care deeply for their students. They had no idea what was going on, and in their eyes, they just saw a student who was, well, very forgetful and possibly, in their eyes, a slacker. It most certainly did not help that this was in the middle of the test and a student going to ask to use the bathroom in the middle of a test. I mean, I definitely can't blame the teacher's line of reasoning that they were hesitant to allow their student to go and use the bathroom. And it seems from how the story was told, they were extremely apologetic and understood that, oh, this isn't one of the problem students, and they learned it the hard way. And yeah, it definitely sucks that the student had to go through that and the teacher had to go through that. I really like the tattooed librarian's addition here because it helps give some insight that honestly I really wouldn't have thought of. The fact that they have to constantly monitor who has gone, who hasn't gone, the fact there's going to be chain reactions, and just everything else that's going to happen from one kid using the bathroom, especially during a test nonetheless. Hidden Jam, 1966. Road Rager decided to harass my sister. I don't know if I should post here, so you be the judge. So this happened eons ago. My sister just got her driver's license, and to celebrate, we, together with some friends and family, decided to take a day trip to the beach. There were a bunch of us, like 4-car load full of people. On the way there, all drivers were aware that my sister was a new driver, so everyone drove in accordance to the highway speed limit. My sister was at the back of the convoy, and every so often someone would check on my sister to make sure she didn't get lost or fall too far behind. Being a new driver, she drove on the rightmost side of the highway as a courtesy to people who are way faster than her. It was quite busy and it was a 2-lane highway. There were lots of cars on the road and everyone wanted to drive on the passing lane. She drove the speed limit. There's this huge gap between her and the next car in front. There was this asshole driver, let's call him Richard, who decided to harass my sister by tailgating her, eventually overtaking, cutting her off, and then brake checking her. When Richard had enough of making my sister's life miserable, he decided to go on his merry way. Cue our cousins. Car 1 was directly in front of Richard. Car 2 matched Richard's speed beside him. My sister slowed down enough to let Car 3 get behind Richard, eventually boxing Richard in. They then proceeded to drive at a speed slightly slower than the speed limit, driving Richard into a fit of apoplexy. We did this for a full 1 or 2 minutes, driving Richard up the wall, full-on driving while honking his horn while everyone laughed like crazy. He eventually merged into the shoulder and proceeded to stop. We, on the other hand, decided it wasn't worth our time to pursue. Ah, good times. Well, this is fun and will probably make them think twice in the future. Don't do this. This is a really good way to end up getting someone injured or killed. And I am being a bit of a buzzkill here, I know that, but road rage can lead people to do some really crazy shit. And if you roll the dice improperly and it turns out the one person who has road rage that you're fucking with has a gun, it could go really badly. So please, if you notice that someone has road rage but it's not directed towards you, just slow down and let them get as far away from you as possible. But if it is directed towards you, go to a public place as quick as possible, like a gas station or just somewhere where there's like a lot of people. Or a police station. That's actually a pretty easy one to do, is just go to a police station if someone's following you and they have road rage. That usually knocks it off pretty quick. I know I'm being a killjoy here, but it could save your life. One-eyed win. I'm not trying to cheat. I lost my eye. So I was 19 when I had my left eye removed. It was my senior year of high school and I had to take the SAT. When they removed my eye, they replaced it with a small orbital implant, over which my prosthesis would fit once all the tissue healed, which took about 8 weeks. Pirates of the Caribbean had just come out, so there was no way in hell I was wearing an eye patch. I just wanted to be a cute, regular girl in my senior year, so it was sunglasses for me. When I arrived at the place to take my SAT, they told me I could not wear my sunglasses and that it was an accommodation that I should have applied for months before my surgery actually happened. Mind you, these were your grandma's post-surgery sunglasses, not aviators or anything even remotely fashionable. So I flipped my sunglasses up, flashed my empty eye socket at the lady, and told her that I didn't know I'd be getting my eye removed before the deadline. She got quiet and then called into College Board or whatever to ask for a special accommodation, which I was granted. Only now I was crying and didn't even want to take the stupid test. Wasn't my best score, but I took the exam. God, I hate College Board so goddamn much. Their stupid little acorn logo. Whole thing's a goddamn scam. They've literally monopolized college admissions. It's just, ugh. Originally, I had this massive rant and tangent about how College Board is a 501c3 nonprofit, yet they nickel and dime all their test takers to the point where it's pretty ridiculous, and I've heard stories of people spending almost $600 just to take this stupid test. But I cut that out. For you guys, apparently. I have no idea if you guys like the rants or tangents or not. It's hard to tell, honestly. SRMG 925. My husband is digging his grave right now. Matched energy. Content warning, pet death. Yesterday afternoon, my elderly lab passed away in his sleep. It wasn't entirely a surprise, but we thought we'd have a few more days. He was in his comfy bed and, as is common, had released his bowels upon passing. Being a holiday, our only option was to bury him in our yard. We wrapped him up in a blanket and my husband started digging. I went to put his soiled bed in the trash, which is behind a bush on the north side of the house. My neighbor, on that side, doesn't live in the house. He just bought it as an investment property and has been slowly renovating it and tends to be around on weekends and holidays. He's an unpleasant old goat, and I'll just leave it at that. He saw me putting it in the trash and said, "Don't you teach those dogs," we have 3, "not to shit in the house?" I said, "Well, my husband is digging his grave right now, so we'll just have to let it slide." He immediately apologized, but not what I needed to hear at the time. I am not gonna lie, when I first read this story and read the title, I thought she told the neighbor the husband was digging his own grave, and she was telling the neighbor that she was about to pit-style execute her husband. I was like, yeah, that'll do it. Then I realized, no, she just meant that her husband is digging the grave of the dog that passed away. I had to re-record it. Oh, wow. what a different turn of events. Oh, but On the real side of it, that is a very sad story, and as someone who has had their dog pass away in the same room as them and having to deal with both the heartbreaking moment of realizing what's happening as well as having to clean up the mess, it is definitely something where you are not in the headspace to deal with that kind of shit. And yeah, I am incredibly sorry for your loss, and I definitely understand how rough that can be. It sneaks up on you, and you never actually know how much time you have left, because I distinctly remember that same day, Bella was out there just playing rough and being a good dog and having a good time, and they curled up next to me while I was watching Dexter and passed away, and it was fuck, man. Flare fighters. It was bound to happen with how poorly you treated him. Trigger warnings for deliberate animal death and suicide attempts. My biological mother and I were never really close. I'll even state that she never really loved me because, honestly, my life would have been worse if she did. This was far from the first thing that made me want to go no contact, but I was 10 and literally unable to at the time, no matter how much I begged the courts to let me stay with my dad. I don't love much. She pretty much made it hard to love anything because if she noticed I did, she'd do her best to remove any good meaning I could have had from it. From clothes, to TV shows, to toys, and even highly sentimental gifts from deceased family members were ripped away from me because she threw them out or took away everything I had to still view them. When I was 10, me and my brother got goldfish. I think they were a gift from my dad's company, but my dad had cats and was worried about them killing our fish. So, after a talk with our biological mother, she allowed us to take them to her house. Unfortunately, my brother's fish died early on, a mix of stress and my brother not caring about them. But mine were living, and I had even named them, but mysteriously, my fish were dying. Flounder had gone first, then Seb, until Stripe was the only one left. I had cried a lot for them, and had become highly protective of Stripe. I had moved him to my room, I cleaned his tank every day, I changed his water as often as I was suggested to, I even noted down how much food he'd been eating in a day. I had finally convinced myself that Stripe couldn't mysteriously die if I wasn't around, and I finally left him alone for a bit to play with my siblings. I thought everything would be fine, but then I heard my bio mother shout about how unclean the tank was. I was angry because I had cleaned the tank that morning, and walked over to see my bio mother grabbing his tank. I asked her what she was doing, and she just responded, "Cleaning this out since you can't seem to be able to." It had taken me a moment to figure out what she meant by that, but she had a pot of boiling water on the stove and a cup of steaming warm water on the counter. By the time I realized what she was planning, it was too late. She'd grabbed Stripe from his tank and dropped him into the cut of steaming water, and started to dump out his tank. I was screaming, crying, and doing whatever I could to stop him from dying, but between the hot water and sudden drop, there wasn't anything I could have done. I had held him for a long while, just silently crying while my biological mother was acting like it was unavoidable. I remember her telling me, "It was bound to happen with how poorly you treated him." She finally got fed up with my lack of responses and flushed him down the toilet. I hated her for it. I hated her so much. It was 100% avoidable, and I eventually learned she'd been the one killing my fish the entire time. But the entire time she acted like I was in the wrong, like it was my fault I felt that way. My dad didn't understand, and nobody else cared about a fish. Some even offered replacement fish, which I'd turned down. I'll also admit that I had been suicidal for a while. I had tried killing myself by drowning on purpose when I was 9, and this had been one of the last straws I could have handled. I wrote a note, one specifically for my biological mother. I don't remember what I'd written, but I do remember that single phrase she loved to repeat about Stripe. "It was bound to happen with how poorly you treated him." I can't recall how many times I'd written it down. I can't even mention how many notes I'd written, or which one I eventually put on the bathroom sink, where I'd intended to die at 11. I didn't die, but only because I didn't want my siblings to be the ones to find my body. I had no clue what to do, just knowing I didn't want to die where they could see. I handed the note to my older sister and just started walking. My uncle had eventually found me and dragged me back home, but I had just been so numb. I eventually found out that she kept the notes. Yeah, all of the notes. Years later, she asked me about them in the repeating phrase, demanding an answer that would make her look better in front of her friends. She hadn't expected me to respond the same way I always would. "After you killed my pet and told me I was bound to happen with how poorly I treat him, it stuck with me just how poorly you treated me." Fuck, man, that one actually got to me. The only thing that I can really say is that I hope that OP's managed to actually get some distance between him and his mother, because this is rough. I know that some of you might just see this as, oh, it's just a fish, but this was their probably first connection with a pet, one they actually cared for, one they were willing to put themselves through a daily routine of excessive cleaning to ensure that their fish was happy, safe, and healthy. That's a lot of time and effort to go into a fish. They most certainly cared for it. And for it just to be tossed out by their mother like this, their biological mother like this, is fucked up. Do what you can to go no contact, even more than you already are, and good luck, man. And please stay safe. Liverlux0206. Roommate said I had an easy life and clearly never had traumatic experiences after shitting herself. This happened a few years ago when I was a sophomore in college and had just moved into an apartment complex that was in close proximity to said college. I was pretty naive and a pushover, so I would literally bend over backwards to this one horrendous roommate I had. She was a walking biohazard and a poster child for a victim complex. I could go on and on about the shit she pulled, but that's not the point. Pretty soon, living together, there were 4 roommates in total, were having issues as she would not clean up after herself, leaving dishes and food uncovered out for days, wouldn't clean her cat litter, etc. We tried to have roommate chats, but it would end up with her crying and saying she's struggling mentally so she cannot pull her weight, and us leaving the convo unsatisfied. It came to a boiling point when she had too much weed one night and had explosive diarrhea in the kitchen. It was everywhere. She would walk around with no pants or underwear with only a hoodie to barely cover her nether regions, which is why the area of damage was so large. She refused to clean it, claimed she was not in a mentally stable place to do so as seeing the mess triggered her and we should just be fucking considerate. The other 2 roommates and I got around to cleaning that abomination, and I sat the culprit down for a chat. The other 2 were done with her and refused to work out anything anymore, so it was just her and me. The conversation was unproductive. It was mostly her crying, calling us all sorts of names, and stating that she had PTSD, etc., etc. She finally said, "You can't relate because you have led an easy life. I mean, if your biggest problem is the house not being clean, then you just don't have that many issues." This was the breaking point for me, and snapped back with, just because I don't cry about the fucking issues I have when someone asks me to clean up after myself, doesn't mean my life is perfect. I lost my sister to cancer 3 years ago, and you don't hear me using her as an excuse to get out of cleaning my shit stains. The look on her face almost made the labor of scrubbing feces and bleach mixture off the floor worth it. A couple of other stuff happened after that, but her mental health excuses didn't hold as much weight anymore, and we all moved out pretty soon afterwards. What I said about my sister is true. My family and I have processed our grief, but it took a long time, and there were many fights, tears shed, etc. My parents ended up getting a divorce, but all is well now, and I look back on this incident and laugh at the absurdity of it. Yeah, this is just absolutely foul. Someone who doesn't clean up after themselves is an active walking biohazard, doesn't wear pants, literally, god, the mess in general. I'm like actually getting ill thinking about it. Now look, it's one thing to be depressed and live in your own mess, but it's an entirely other thing to be depressed and subject other people to your mess and then expect them to clean up after you. That is foul. Consideration hot, 9518. I got called a puta by a customer. So as a heads up, I haven't taken Spanish in like 8 years, and my skin is subject to moonburn. So this is probably going to be ungodly painful to any person who speaks Spanish fluently. You have been warned. I had a customer who was livid that I couldn't give him a refund on some building supplies. Only the customer service desk could do that. He was on his phone and called me a puta. I smiled sweetly and replied, "Lo siento. Solo soy una puta por mi esposo. Y soy puta sucia." And I believe I just said, "Sorry, I'm only a whore for my husband. And I am a dirty whore." I think puta can mean bitch and another word that starts with an S and ends with a T. But I might be wrong. My Spanish swear words only went so far in high school. And it doesn't make sense for her to say I'm only a bitch for my husband. Quite the dirty bitch. So, maybe that works. Anyways, he shut up and went to customer service where he tried the same shit with a Puerto Rican associate. She gave him a blistering tongue lashing. And we laughed and laughed and laughed. Spanish speakers, how badly did I do? I am very curious. Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code OZ at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.